like to welcome everyone on the call. This is our second of 4 lunch and learn sessions that we will be doing this month of June. This program is being presented by our Professional Development Committee, chaired by Mr. John. John, are you on the call? Goldsberry? I don't see him here yet, but I thought he'd be in. But just wanted to recognize him. Our first topic was a very successful one last week on LinkedIn, put on by Mr. Paul Moore with Apex Ag Solutions, and we appreciate his efforts there, and that went very well. This week's subject is Zoom meeting basics, and our own Katie Allison, office manager at IMAA, is going to present this topic, and she really needs no introduction. Most of you know her quite well. She is all things to everyone, including me, and I think she knows how much I appreciate her and what she does for the association and the membership. So with that being said, why don't I stop talking and give it over to Katie and let her take it away.
All right, thanks, Calvin. Like Calvin said, I'm Katie. Hi. And just here, as we get started, I want to let everybody know that I am recording this so that we can send it out later. I'll do a little bit of editing, touch-ups to it, but we are doing that. And then I'm going to put everybody on mute just so that there's no background noise going on. And you can always unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment, or feel free to use the chat as well. I have that up as well. So I'm gonna put everybody on mute. There we go. And we'll get started. So I'm doing Zoom meeting basics, 6 tips for participating in and running Zoom video meetings. We will go through these pretty quickly here. So my 6 tips are how to create a Zoom account, or creating a Zoom account, Zoom security, testing your equipment, meeting controls, screen sharing, and scheduling a meeting. And just so everybody knows, these are going to be primarily for the desktop version of Zoom or the browser version of Zoom. If you are using it on your mobile, then it will probably look different and have a different feel, different options, different settings, all of that stuff. So just be aware that this is primarily focusing on the desktop and browser versions of Zoom. All right, so tip number 1, create a Zoom account. So creating a Zoom account is pretty straightforward. It's like any of the other accounts that you create online. They ask for your birthday just to verify that you're not underage and getting on here and doing things that you're not supposed to. Once you go through the sign up process, they'll give you options to download plugins. Again, that's all on your own preference on what you want to do with that. It will install things on your machine if you choose to download things, but you absolutely do not have to use Zoom. Once you get finished creating your account, it will take you to your profile page where at the very minimum, you want to have your full name on there, first and last name, and a profile picture. That will be very helpful during meetings to help identify people. It's a great look for when you're joining meetings. It gives you a little more customization and personalization to your Zoom account. There's also the option to download the Zoom client software. So when I refer to the Zoom client software, that is the actual program Zoom will install on your machine to help you run meetings. It is not a requirement at all. You can do everything straight from your browser, and Zoom will not install software on your machine. Having a Zoom account makes it a lot easier to join meetings and definitely to host meetings, and the basic accounts are free. There are a couple limitations to the basics accounts. If you have more than 3 people on a meeting and you're hosting the meeting, you only have a 40-minute time limit if your account is free. If you're using a free account to join meetings, as long as the person that's hosting it is using a paid account, that's not a big deal. Like right now, IMAA has paid accounts, we have paid licenses. We can host meetings with no time limits. We have some participant limits, but they're pretty high, and it's pretty affordable, and it's very easy to use. So here's what the profile page looks like. So we've got, it'll take you to your profile on the browser. You can click on the little change button that's where you change your profile icon, and you can see that if I turn my video off, my profile picture shows up instead. And then you definitely want to put in your first and last name for your own account when you're joining meetings and everything. So tip number 2, Zoom security. This has been a kind of a hot topic for different people. So I am, just disclaimer, I am not an expert on all of the security options and or lack thereof that Zoom has. But these are some practical tips that you can use either for yourself if you're joining a Zoom meeting or if you plan on hosting a Zoom meeting that you can control. So one of those things is Zoom now, after an update back in April, requires meeting passwords by default. You can turn that off, but it used to be off, and they've turned it on to make it a default. What that does is help prevent Zoom bombing, which many of you may have heard is a thing where people were just randomly joining meetings by typing in some Zoom URLs and then doing not nice things in other people's meetings. So if you require a meeting password, that is going to help prevent some of that. It's on by default. You don't have to change anything if you're setting up your own meetings. Another great tip is do not share your meeting link once you've already created it, or your personal meeting ID on social media. Then everybody can see it, especially if all of your stuff is public. So even if you're doing like a broad audience meeting, if you're creating a specific meeting for that, you do not want to share the join link on your social media. The workaround to that is if you have a broad audience for your meeting, you want to require registration for that meeting. Much like this meeting, we didn't have a specific group of people that we were inviting to this meeting. We wanted people to sign up for it, any IMAA members. So you had to go through a registration process to then get the join link. As a participant, you should not be sharing that link that was sent to you to anybody else. You want those people to go and sign up on their own so that the meeting host knows who's joining your meeting. Another tip is to be wary of any links or files that are shared in the chat by people that you don't know. If you are in a large group meeting that has a lot of attendees and you're not aware of everybody that's going to be in this meeting, and somebody throws up a link and they don't announce anything about that link, it just shows up in the chat, don't click on it. It's like getting spam email. Just wait until somebody either explains it, or somebody should announce if they're sharing a file for attendees and what it is and everything that goes along with that. That's just a very courteous thing to do and makes you aware of what's going on. The Zoom client software, so the software that Zoom will want to install on your machine, it is quicker and it is easier to use, especially if you're setting up and hosting meetings, but it is absolutely not required. You can always bypass that option on your join links that are sent to you and just open Zoom in your browser. This will not install anything on your machine. Your browser will request from you permission to use your camera and your microphone and all of that good stuff. But Zoom is not using any of your, or is not installing anything on your machine. If you do choose to download and use the Zoom client software, that's what I have on my machine. You always want to have the latest version of it. They are constantly doing version updates and security patches because they had explosive growth back at the beginning of March from, I think it was something like 10 to 20,000 users to 200,000 users almost overnight. It was pretty ridiculous. So that made them a big target for people with malicious intent, hackers and that sort of thing. They've had to learn really quickly, and they've been doing a good job of it. But that does mean that you need to continually update your version of Zoom whenever they have an update. If you have people or that want to join your meetings that they've been restricted from using Zoom, again, there's always ways around that. You can include the option for people to just call in. It's not preferred. Zoom is a video software or a video conferencing software program, but the option for people to call in should always be there just in case they do have some restrictions for using Zoom. It's not going to load anything on their phone. It's exactly like calling into a conference call. So there's always having that option. And then beyond that, Zoom has a lot more advanced security settings in your user profile and your user management stuff. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can use waiting rooms. You can set your own passwords. There's just a plethora of things you can do, where data is routed, all of that stuff. But the bottom line, for most meetings, for most use cases, Zoom is going to be safe to use. All right. Tip number 3, testing your equipment. So testing your equipment, you will always have the option before joining a meeting, unless you are calling in, to test your video and audio settings. And you definitely want to do this if you have not been on Zoom meetings before, if it's your first time, if it's been a long time, if you're switching machines, switching devices that you're using to access a meeting, or if your computer has speakers but not a microphone. You either want to use computer audio or the phone audio. You don't want to use both, because then your phone's going to pick up what your computer speakers are hearing or are outputting, and you will get that really bad Zoom echo that you get every once in a while. And nobody wants to be that person on a call that constantly pops up on the video because everything's echoing back and forth between your phone and your computer. Another great tip is to preview your video before you join a meeting. This is really easy to do in the Zoom client software. You can do it at any given time, but you want to double check what's behind you. Are you lit from behind? In that case, you're going to be completely dark and nobody's going to be able to see your face. So you want to have kind of decent lighting all around to make sure people can see you. Are we only looking at your forehead and your ceiling? Are we looking straight up your nose? Like, what's going on? Did you just have lunch? Is somebody coming in behind you, walking back and forth in your hallway? Just be aware of your surroundings and what's going on behind you. And previewing your video is going to help you do that. And you can always turn your video off to fix something if you need to, so that nobody sees any of that other great stuff going on. And then you also want to test your microphone. If you're sitting way back in your chair and your microphone is built into your laptop or your computer, can we still hear you? Is it going to come up? You can test, and it'll give you a phrase to speak back and forth to your computer and play it back to you to make sure you still sound good. I know one of the things on my laptop is that if I have my headphones plugged in and my headphones don't have a microphone on them, my laptop still thinks I have headphones with a microphone plugged in. So it won't pick up what I'm saying on the built-in microphone on my laptop. It thinks that I have a microphone plugged in as well, because it's all using the same jack. Again, using the Zoom client software, you can test your audio and video at any given time using the little settings gear icon. And this is also where you can add virtual backgrounds to your meeting or to your own little area. That's an advanced, I would call it an advanced technique anyway. But this is the Zoom, when I reference the Zoom client software, this is the dashboard that it gives you. It's its own program that pops up. And this is the little settings gear icon. It's not totally obvious, but that's where you go to get your settings. And then these are all the settings that you will get throughout the software, and you can just test and see what's going on behind you. And there's a whole bunch of settings that you can change on there to make yourself look good. So we got tip number 4, the meeting controls. All right, so meeting controls. This is all the stuff that you are probably most familiar with. We've got the meeting controls usually appear at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if everybody wants to look and see, there should be down there at the bottom of your screen. The exception to that is if you are sharing your screen and you're still on the default settings, it'll move all of your meeting controls to the top of the screen. You can change that to where it returns back to the bottom of your screen, but usually when you just log on, all your meeting controls are going to be at the bottom, and then if you share your screen, they're going to move to the top. Your mute and audio controls look like the little microphone. This is also where you can change all of your audio settings while you are in a meeting. If you have multiple speakers, if you have the multiple headphones to multiple microphones. I have a lot of things plugged into my computer, and I want to make sure that whatever I have chosen works. Another great tip is, I think it's by default, if you hold down your space bar, you can temporarily unmute yourself.
Cameras.
Yeah, so that's a great way. Instead of clicking unmute and then you forget to turn it back on again, if you forget to turn your mute back on, you just hold down your space bar, you can talk and it'll pick it up, and then once you release it, it'll put you back on mute. Tom has asked a question over in the chat. He says, are host controls different? And yes, they are. I see different things than what you guys are seeing right now. And you'll probably be able to see that when I get to the next slide, because I've got some screenshots to go along with that. The video controls, they are the stop and start video controls. They look like a little camera right next to the little microphone. Again, that's where you can adjust all of your video settings while you're in the meeting. So if you do have something going on weird with your video, you can change your video settings there. Participants, that's the little people icon, and it'll say participants underneath it, and it should have a number next to it to show how many participants are in the meeting. That lets you, if you click on that, it'll pop up a list of participants. And in that list of participants, if you hover next to your name, it should pop up with either mute, unmute, or more next to that. And under more, you should be able to rename yourself. And if you're logged in, I think you can also change your profile picture. But I'm not entirely sure on that one because I'm always logged in, so I could, and I'm usually the one hosting meetings, so I'm usually able to change my profile picture. But you should be able to either rename yourself or change your profile picture, depending on the settings on that as well. Another little quick tip on that is if you hover over your own video, you should also see unmute and 3 dots. The 3 dots is essentially the more button. So you can also rename yourself there by hovering over your video. One of the other options that you may see is the chat. It's got a little chat bubble, and that will open up the chat window, and you can go at it like you're using AOL Instant Messenger back in 2003. That's pretty much the only way I communicated when I was in high school, so that's why I put that in there. So that is a great way to interact with speakers or other participants during a presentation. If everybody's muted, then obviously you're not going to be able to talk to each other, but you can message either the speaker or an individual participant. You can message everyone. So there's a lot of different ways to use that chat. And again, it's really great to silently participate in a meeting. You can also share files and links in the chat. And just like I said, you can chat to everybody or just individual people or the host. At the end of the day, every meeting is going to be different, and the host actually determines some of these settings. So some of the things that I've talked about, you may not be able to do in some meetings just because of the way that the host has set up the meeting. Some hosts turn off the chat. Some hosts don't allow attendees to chat to other individual attendees. It really just kind of depends on what the host is doing when they're setting up their meeting. So Tom, to answer your question, so this is a screenshot of what I see as a host, but I'm going to point out the ones that you guys should be able to see, which are the mute video, participants, and chat. You'll probably also have like reactions or something like that. I think I have those turned on. But like as a host, I also have security and breakout rooms and some other settings. And they also, depending on what I have turned on, that can also change. But these are kind of the basic ones that you're going to see and what you'll want to use. The little arrows next to the icons mean that there's more options there. If you click on those, that's where all your audio settings will show up, all your video settings will show up. So there's several different ways to interact with your meeting controls there. And then I also want to point out, up in the top right-hand corner, for most people, you are going to see either gallery view, speaker view, or enter exit full screen. And I think that's if your screen is not being shared, because there's some different ways to set your views up there as well, so that you can see the meeting whichever way you prefer. All right, so on this one, I've opened the participants and the chat, and they show up as two little boxes over on this side. I am not in full screen view, so this would be to enter full screen, but I was in a regular non-full screen view here, and they show up over on the side. If you are in full screen or full screen mode, then your chat and participant boxes are going to show up as pop-up boxes, and they'll probably cover up something on your screen unless you have two screens to be able to drag that stuff around. And then this is where I was talking about, if you're in your participants and you hover over more, you can rename yourself. And I think, again, if you're logged in, you may be able to edit your profile picture, but I know you can definitely rename yourself. All right, so now we've got screen sharing. So there's kind of two ways to look at that. There's either the person that is actively sharing their screen, or you're the one viewing a shared screen. So as the person sharing their screen, you can select either an open application or program when you hit the share screen button, or you can share your actual screen view. I don't really recommend that you do that unless there's just no way to have a separate open application for you to view, just because if you don't have your notifications hidden, so let's say you're getting notifications from like Microsoft Teams or Slack or any or Outlook, any of those things that pop up at the bottom of your screen, everybody's going to be able to see that. If you're switching back and forth between windows and you have something that may be some private information open on that screen, people will be able to see that. So really having the actual screen view is not going to be the best option. If you're wanting to show like a PowerPoint or a PDF or a Word document, it'll give you the option to show that document in particular. and then you're only looking at that. And then also, if you're in the middle of the meeting and you're the one showing that, you can be doing other things and nobody will be none the wiser because they can only see that document that you're showing. The meeting controls, like I said before, once you hit that share screen, they'll usually float to the top of your screen. You can change that setting and bring them back down to the bottom, but I think by default they just float to the top, and it's a little disorienting to go from everything being at the bottom to now you have to look for it at the top, but you get used to it pretty quickly. There's an option for sharing a whiteboard or annotate functions to allow for collaboration. So for example, I've got annotate turned on right now, and all of you can also annotate. And I've got it to where we can also see who does the annotation. So if I want to highlight something, let's see, say I want to say this is my screen sharing. Hopefully everybody is also seeing that I just drew a blue oval around screen. And I should be able to then select that and it'll tell me Katie Allison did that. When you share your screen, one of the options is also whiteboard, which is a completely white board. I'll pull that up right now. So it's just a blank whiteboard that you can draw on. So they're really great tools for collaboration, being able to do things as a team. Maybe you're doing some sort of networking thing and you're playing a game with your family and you're doing like Pictionary or something like that. Those are some of the things that you can do from that. So we'll get back to the presentation. There. Sure. There we go. All right. So that's one of the neat and different features of using Zoom. If you're sharing your screen and you need to switch to another document or another program, you can always select new share, and that's where you do all your switching. And then if your meeting is you're doing a presentation with somebody else and they need to share their screen, pretty much by default, it's turned on to where only one person can share their screen at a time. So you would have to click in share or stop share to allow that other participant to then share their screen. One of the settings that a host can change is the ability to allow multiple people to share their screens at the same time, but that's not turned on by default. So you would have to stop sharing your screen to allow somebody else to share. As a participant watching a shared screen, it will usually default into a full screen mode. You can turn that off if you want to use your chat or you want to view your participants along the side, like I showed on one of the previous slides. And it will also give you some different viewing options for your video gallery. In general, it normally goes along across the top for that, but there are obviously going to be different options for all of this. So then one of the other things that usually happens when it enters in full screen mode, and you want it in full screen mode, you don't want to turn that off, is that your video gallery will stack down usually the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see everybody that's participating and their videos in a stacked window. I have been in several meetings where people say, well, I can't see what's on the screen because these little video boxes are in the way. You can always drag those around. Only you are seeing that. So you can drag those around, move them around, get them off of whatever they are in the way of. You can also select different options on that little stacked box screen to be able to see more. So there's 3 different settings. You can actually, I think there's 4 different settings. You can see all of the videos in a stack. You can choose to only see the active speaker, or you could also choose to only have a little box that tells you who's talking and not see anybody's video. I think the fourth option, and I'm not sure if all participants get this or if it was just me as a host that gets this, you can also switch back to gallery view to where you see everybody on one big screen on one side of your computer. So we'll look at some of those. So this was me sharing a screen with myself, and all my videos are stacked over here along the side. This is the view options up here is where you can change and exit full screen mode if you would like to use the participant list or the chat. And these little icons right here are where you change how to view this video gallery down the side. You can also just pick up and drag this box around your screen to wherever you prefer it to be. That was the stacked mode, that double line. This is the middle one is the active speaker mode right there. So it'll only show one little video box and it will be whoever is actively speaking. And then the next setting is the just the little box that shows you who's talking, which is going to take up the least amount of room on your screen. And that's the little line on the far left-hand side of that box. And again, you can drag this around to wherever you want it to be. All right, tip number 6, scheduling a meeting. I'm trying to go as quickly as possible here, guys. So to schedule a meeting, we've got, you can either schedule the meeting directly through your browser on the Zoom website. You're going to have a lot more meeting options when you schedule your meeting this way. You're also going to be able to use some meeting templates if you have a particular meeting type and you get all the settings just the way you want it, and you know this type of meeting is going to happen multiple times, you can save that as a template, and then when you create a new meeting, you can use that template for each of those additional meetings that you're creating. If you're scheduling through your browser, again, you're not going to install any of the Zoom software on your computer. However, you do have to remember after you hit that save button at the bottom and you've got all your settings the way you want it and you hit save and it's scheduled the meeting, you have to remember to move it to the calendar that you normally use. Otherwise, it's only showing up in Zoom. If you're in Zoom every day, that's not a big deal. But if you're using your Outlook calendar or your Google calendar or your Yahoo calendar or your iPhone calendar, whatever calendar it is, then you're not going to see your meeting on there. You didn't install anything for it to talk to the Zoom website. So you have to remember to add it to your calendar if you're using just the browser. There are several different plugins that you can download that then connect your native software to the Zoom website and your Zoom account to be able to sync this information back and forth. I use Outlook, that's what I'm most familiar with. So what you would have to download the Outlook plugin for Zoom and give it permission to access Outlook. And then it is just like scheduling a regular Outlook meeting or an Outlook item on your calendar. You do have more limited meeting setting options when you do this. Most noticeably, you can't require registration, but it's also assuming that you have a list of set contacts that you are sending out this meeting to. So that's one of the things with the Outlook meeting option, but this will sync your Outlook Zoom meetings with your Zoom browser meetings so that you'll be able to see them in the Zoom client software on the browser in your Outlook calendar. You're going to get all the notifications that you're used to getting. All right, and then some bonus Zoom etiquette quick tips. Really quickly, these are some of the things that kind of drive me up a wall or I've seen happen on different meetings. Mute your microphone when you are not speaking in Zoom if your host does not. That's just a common courtesy so that whenever you're, if you have something going on in the background, nobody else, your audio isn't taking over whoever is presenting. Use your first and last name during professional meetings. Don't change your name unless your host or presenter asks you to. For people like me who host a lot of meetings and has to take attendance at some of these meetings, you don't use your real name. If you're using a nickname, if you're changing your name constantly throughout the meeting because you've found out how to do it and you think it's fun, then it's really hard for me to take that attendance if I don't know who you are. Same goes for any other professional setting meeting. If you're in a meeting and you don't know who these people are, how are you going to connect with them later? You don't know what that guy's first name is because he just has C. Lee. You know, you don't know who that is, but he had some really good points that he brought up during your meeting. So make sure to use your first and last name during a meeting. Use your video, turn your video on. A lot of communication happens in your facial features and your facial expressions. It's also a lot easier for people to tune out when their video is off. If you want to be respectful to your host, then you turn your video on so that they can see that you're paying attention, that they know what's going on. I noticed that like everybody's video was off, so hopefully you guys are all listening during my meeting. But there are exceptions to this, obviously. If you're eating during a meeting, which we know we're all busy, that happens sometimes, then turn your video off. Nobody wants to see you eat. If you're going to the bathroom, particularly if you're using a mobile device, please make sure that your video is turned off and don't take your phone with you. That can be really not great. Or if just for any reason you need to jump up from your computer for just a minute, you can turn your video off. Nobody's going to be bothered by that. On the same token, because everybody's doing video meetings now, a lot of things that used to be taboo, like doing a video meeting from home, having your kids come in during a meeting, having your pets come in during a meeting, having your significant other walk through, it's not a big deal anymore, guys. Nobody really cares what's going on with that. If somebody obviously wants to have a conversation with you, then yeah, you probably need to pause for a minute and turn your video off to be courteous. But if somebody's just walking through, if something is going on, then it's really not that big a deal anymore. Only you care about what's going on in your own house. Nobody else cares. And sometimes it's kind of nice to see behind the veil of what's going on in your personal lives and make that little bit more of a personal connection. Another thing is that Zoom webinars are completely different from Zoom meetings. They have different settings and different ways of setting them up. You have to have a separate license to host Zoom webinars, and I think attendees don't have as much freedom to do things in Zoom webinars. So if you're interested in doing a Zoom in a webinar, then know what those differences are and make sure you're choosing the right platform for your circumstance. And then kind of last tip, if you are going to record your meeting as a host, please let everybody know that you're recording. Again, those little naked kids running through the living room probably don't need to be on, and you may decide to have your video turned off if that is the case. During a meeting, if somebody is recording to either post online or share later. Also, as a participant, a lot of times you do have the option to record, and it is absolutely a common courtesy just to ask for that permission if the meeting is not being recorded to begin with. But if the host asks you not to record or do any screen captures during your meeting, please respect that host's wishes. They probably have very good reasons for why they don't want any recordings or screen captures going on during their meetings. There may be some proprietary information, there may be some sensitive information, whatever their reasons are. If they ask you not to do any recording or screen captures, please do not. So that is all I've got. So I know I went a little bit over time. I was trying to get through it pretty quickly. I talk a lot and try to rush. So if anybody has any additional questions or not, I know Calvin, you probably want to wrap this up. So.
Yeah, nice work, Katie. I learned a few things that I didn't know. that's going to help me in the future. And I'm sure everyone on here has used Zoom many times before. You probably recognize there were some things on there that may be helpful to you all as well. The one question I was going to ask Katie was about the recording. When you were talking about the buttons at the bottom of the screen, I looked down and I had a record button. I was wondering if everyone else had that. I know that you and I are in the same program. Does everyone else have that? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. It seems a little. I don't know. Recording someone when they're not with them not knowing you're recording them seems to be an issue to me. I don't want anybody recording me unless I know they're doing it. And I'm glad you said that, Katie, that it's a common courtesy to let someone know that you're recording them. But I notice also if you click on the participant button, you can see on that list, at least I could, if someone was muted, both video and audio, and then I saw if they were recording or not. So you can see if someone's recording, but just the mere fact that they can do it just kind of blew my mind. The whiteboard thing, wow, I didn't know that was there. That's pretty neat. There's a lot you can do with that. Um, just some little tips here. So does anyone else have any questions or thoughts before we wrap it up here? Well, again, thank you all for being on. Next Friday, our topic is keyboard shortcuts, and that is going to be put on by John Goldsberry and Moser Crush Stone. So we look forward to learning something from that as well. So in the meantime, take care of yourselves, enjoy the weekend, and look forward to seeing you again. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
See you.
Katie.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Katie.
everybody.
Thanks, Calvin.